welcome to our EdTech Leader interview. My name is Angie Rodriguez, and we have Mr. Ricardo Guerra. He works for United Independent School District. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon.
So, Mr. Guerra, what is your job title and how long have you been in this position?
Sure thing. My job title is Data Evaluator, and I have been in this position for at least 5 years. I can't remember exactly when I started. All the years have kind of blended in by this point.
Mm-hmm. Great. So what led you to get into this position?
I have always been involved in technology, and not to mention, I also have a degree in information systems. So the new route that the district is taking with all the data that's coming in through testing is I'm kind of putting it into use and trying to dissect all that information that's coming in and being able to give the administrators valuable information based off of that raw data.
Nice. So that kind of goes into my second question. What other roles and responsibilities are you in charge of besides the ones you mentioned?
Besides being a data evaluator, I am in charge of 3 programs, well, actually 4. The high school student profile, the student growth measure for UISD, and what's the other program? It's a couple of programs for the counselors that I can't really get into with because there's a lot of private information in there. So
yes, of course. OSHA.
Yes.
Now, in regards to technology in the district, how does your role contribute to any type of technology in the district?
Well, as you know, the past few years have been a very unique time for the education industry, with most districts having gone virtual. So technology is more implemented now than it was, say, maybe even 10 years ago. So the way that we're helping our department is through all the information that's coming in, test scores, state standard scores, all that raw data, we kind of process it and see if all of the technology, either the programs that we bought or the software that we're using for the students, is actually increasing their performance in these state exams.
Nice. So
basically, we're getting the best bang for the buck.
Perfect. So I heard that you mentioned something about software for the students. So with that particular software that you guys work with, how do you evaluate the effectiveness of that software technology for those students?
It falls in different realms. We present the data to let's say, the elementary director, and that elementary director decides if the results the students are getting is good enough, basically, because it's not our job to say this is good, this is not good. It's up to the administrators or the directors or the executive directors to take a look at the data that we give them, and it's usually historical data, maybe 5 years back, 2 years back, pre-COVID, post-COVID, because there's also what they call the COVID slide that we got to take into account of.
Yes.
Of how the students, where they should be, where they currently are, and kind of give them a rough estimate of where they should be with the COVID slide. So it's not essentially our decision to make, is it effective? We present the data as far as this is how the student is doing. This is how a student 3 years ago is doing, or even last year. And the directors, along with their program coordinators, go ahead and decide, is this software actually helping? If it isn't, is there anything else that could assist?
Correct. Yes. So the numbers speak for themselves then.
The numbers basically to speak, but sometimes the raw data is just too raw that some administrators, or like I said, district personnel, can't really understand what does this number mean. And it's basically our job to tell them, this is what this number means. And it's kind of tricky when it gets to the state, because the state every single year says, okay, a 30 is good, while the following year 30 is bad.
Mhm.
So that's the only one that we really can't keep up to date with, but we can kind of judge based on previous years how the state is going to judge a student or grade a student.
Yes. So if there's any issues that arise, like let's say the numbers aren't matching up, especially now with the COVID times or the pandemic, the virtual learning that we were, how do you guys resolve or kind of like work through those issues?
If the numbers don't match up, we basically get together as a group, and each one of us will do the same operation and see what rationale we went through to get our responses,
Mhm.
and see why it doesn't match. Because sometimes it does happen where the numbers that we have doesn't match up with the numbers with the state. But
Mhm.
then it might be because, well, the state assigns a student to a district based where they are at the end of October,
Right.
what they call the snapshot.
Mhm.
So if a student moves outside of the district, technically they still count towards us, even though they're not testing with us.
Yes.
So it kind of gets tricky at that point, because even a student who enters ninth grade, according to the state of Texas, is part of UISD cohort. So we're responsible for them graduating. If they don't graduate, it counts negatively on the district. So it's one of those that I go through on a yearly basis saying, okay, this student yes, this student no. Texas has them as a no, we have them as a yes. What's the difference? And then we submit our documentation, tell them this is the reason why. And it's up to the state to see, okay, that's valid enough data. We'll go ahead and change them from a no to a yes.
Perfect. Perfect. So my last question for you, Mr. Guerra, talking about tying it back into the COVID times, the virtual learning, the all of this technology now that I believe that United ISD is going towards the EOCs or the STAR exams are now being delivered through their Chromebooks or virtually. So how has that made a significance in your data evaluation as your part of your job? What kind of
It
things have you seen? Like, is it good? Is it bad?
it's good because even if you take a look at 2 or 3 years ago, or even the year before COVID
Mhm.
happened, there were paper testers, and by paper testers means they would actually be an actual piece of paper saying this student tested, not tested, and we would have to count each paper to make sure that we have all the testers there. So we would have 2 to 3 days, depending on which campus it was or grade levels, and we would have middle school and high school coordinators counting stacks of paper, making sure that the campus count matches our count that we submit to TEA.
Mhm.
So now with the new online system, it's instantaneous. There's no counting because there's no physical papers to count or physical books, because that was another thing.
Mhm.
If the state of Texas gave you 437 books and you return 436, that brings up a red flag on the Texas system.
Correct.
So we had to make sure, just like we counted each one of those answer documents, we had to count every single book
Mhm.
and make sure that we had everything accounted for.
Right. Well, thank you for your time, Mr. Guerra. Thank you for joining us here in the EdTech interview for for this class. Thank you for listening to us. This is all for the EdTech leader. Thank you, Mr. Guerra, again.